job interviews are not on the level. The questions they're asking you should not be answered and taken literally, should not be answered for the question itself. It's always at the indirect message you're sending through the answer to the question. Like a presidential debate, where they ask you, what is the biggest problem facing a country? It's not so much no one knows what the biggest problem is and you're the one to tell us. How your strategy for solving that biggest problem reveals about your character or value as a potential politician or presidential candidate. It's the same kind of thing in job interviews. The answer is not actually about the question. You have to answer the questions while addressing some other amorphous, indirect part of you. And this is arguably very sneaky. And one of the tactics that is very sneaky is something called the coffee cup test. The coffee cup test is a hiring strategy. The recruiter takes candidates for a walk to the kitchen to offer them a drink, whether it be water, coffee, a cup of tea, or a soft drink. They then go back to the interview room, have the interview, and at the end of the interview, they want to see if that candidate voluntarily takes the cup back to the kitchen. The person who would take their own cup back to the kitchen, whether they wash it up or put it away or at least ask someone what to do with it, that shows a very considerate person and someone who plays nicely in their organizational culture. And the quote here is that you can develop skills, you can gain knowledge, you can gain experience, but really it comes down to attitude. And they were trying to find the lowest level task they could find, regardless of what you do inside the organization. And that is still super important. And most candidates that at least offer to take their cup back, the only few that didn't were ruled out of that interview pool. It is like inviting a house guest over. The last thing I would personally want is for that person to start washing up the cup at my house. I like to do my dishes in a very specific way, and my infection control protocols are very stringent. As a microbiologist, they might break them. So I don't want other people to do that in my house. And I certainly wouldn't use that as an interview technique. I guess what I would do in that situation is instinctively, I would probably offer to at least take the cup somewhere. It certainly wouldn't make me think that was a deal breaker if I didn't do it. These are the mind games some of these employers are playing through the vehicle of job interviews, which are way more anxiety ridden than they have any right to be. Another article from The Guardian talks about the 5 worst job interview questions that people have been asked of late. How do you feel your life has worked out for you so far? What a terrible, loaded psychological trick of a question. How do you feel your life has worked out for you so far? Well, obviously it can't be going that great if you're here interviewing at this job. This question actually invited the applicant to post a 2 to 5 minute video response, and expecting the applicant to be a very effective editor of their videos and be very confident on a camera. This could be a new low in the always humiliating experience that is the job interview. And really, job interviews are humiliating. I've never been through a job interview process where I didn't feel thoroughly humiliated by the end. That's just how these processes go, whether they be in your mind or literally built into the process. Let's go through 5 of these worst job interview questions in this article. If you were a piece of fruit, what would you be? Terrible question. If I was a piece of fruit, what would I be? I guess an apple? Crisp? Fresh? There's no right answer, I don't think. Apparently the correct answer here is an apple. I somehow stumbled onto the correct answer, but maybe it's because apple's the most boring fruit. You're not giving anything away about yourself here. How would you respond if you were being sexually harassed by your boss? Obviously, this is just your understanding of policy. It's reported to HR, reported to your boss. If your boss is the one sexually harassing you, report it to your boss's boss's boss. Okay. What is the worst mistake you have ever made at work, and what will you do to fix it? I guess the best way of answering this question is to talk about your overcorrection for a mistake, where maybe you use some resources that you weren't intending on using, but still led to a good outcome that showed your over-conservative approach to some types of work. The example here is, instead of printing 10 copies, which is all you needed, you produced 100 copies. So you used a lot of extra resources, but you were very ready with extra things, but you didn't need to do the extra work that you ended up doing anyway. The worst mistake I've ever made at work is probably thinking I was ready for these job interviews when in fact I wasn't. There's no great answer to this. Talk about a situation where you were over prepared and did more than you had to, and you've learned over time how to work smarter, not just harder. Next worst job interview question. You've got a rather varied CV. Why have you never managed to stick at anything. If you've only stayed in one place and accomplished lots of great things, they will say, why have you only ever been at one place? If you've jumped around and moved to lots of different jobs, they will say, why have you not ever stuck around at one single job? There is no correct way to do this. There is no perfect career trajectory. If you've bounced around a lot, all you can focus on is you love learning new skills and having new experiences. And at every stop of the way, you've led key outcomes that are strategically aligned with that institution or that organization's values before you moved on, which is another reason why the idea of quiet quitting, which we talked about in a previous episode, linked up here, it's really important to leave any job with some key outcome that you can point to before you move on to the next position. The last worst job interview question is one that is very generic. Where do you see yourself, or what do you see yourself doing in 5 years' time? With any luck, I'll still be here doing a good job for you. Hopefully you've seen the organizational hierarchy chart for that organization, so you know, hey, I'm applying for this job, and the next rung up, you can talk about the positions within an organization. Another great place for looking at job interview horror stories is Reddit, and this thread, linked in the show notes below, what was the worst job interview you've had, has 57,000 upvotes and 18,000 comments. So clearly bad job interviews are a real thing, and they're a plague among job applicants. If you could be any animal, what would you be? The person answered otter because they're fun, active, work well with their hands, and cute as anything. And apparently the organization was looking for predators. So we only hired predators, not prey. They were looking for lions, tigers, and snakes or something like that. That should have been a red flag that organization is a little dicey at best with respect to their company culture. What animal would I be? I think I'd be a giraffe, so I can see into the future, see above everyone, and predict what's going to happen next and preempt the next innovation. That one's for free. You can take that one if you ever asked what animal would you be in a job interview setting. I had an interview where I knew the answers. I gave her good, solid examples. I understood the technical side really well, but the interviewer kept sneering, being rude, and saying, really? 40 minutes into the whole interview, a light switch goes off and the interviewer all of a sudden becomes super, super nice. He started selling the role and the position and saying, hey, we're a really good company. You should work for us, because their interview technique is to live stream the interviewee to a whole panel and to throw insults at them to see how that person will respond under pressure and respond to rudeness and jerkiness. And if the person remained very polite and calm, that was a great sign that this person would be a good fit at a company. But the person then declined that job because, of course, why would you want to work at a place where insolence and rudeness is the baseline expectation?